Good morning and welcome to Arizona. I want you all to just kind of close your eyes for a minute and repeat our unofficial state motto. It's a dry heat. I'm Doug Hockstad. I am the Assistant Vice President for Tech Launch Arizona. We're the commercialization unit for the University of Arizona, and we're responsible for, along with the commercialization of technology, the kind of enlarging and supporting the ecosystem around entrepreneurialism in Southern Arizona. Over the last 10 years, I'd say Arizona has become less and less of a flyover state, and we're getting more and more things happening. Through us, we are producing double-digit improvements over where we started 10 years ago. We're in our 10th year, coming up on our anniversary. In number of startups, all the autumn metrics that you may be familiar with, startups, patents, invention disclosures, all those things have seen double-digit growth over the last 10 years. What we're also seeing is tremendous growth in venture capital. Just in the last week, I talked to 3 different people that are starting venture capital firms in Arizona, mostly in Phoenix area, but that's okay. You know, I would put a lot of our, well, I should also add, we just finished an economic impact report, and over the last 5 years, TLA and our entrepreneurial startups and efforts have had a $1.6 billion impact on the state, projected to have a $4.7 billion impact in the next 10 years. So that's kind of what's happening here, and I would say that I put part of that success on our relationship with FNAI. Our relationship with FNAI allows us to reward innovation, raise the profile of really innovative people on campus, and highlight them to the rest of the campus to get everybody else interested in what's going on. So I really do believe that this is a valuable thing for us, for our campus, and for the region. With all that said, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Phil Weilerstein, as the CEO of VentureWell. Phil?
Thank you, Doug. Good morning. Very pleased to be with you this morning to moderate the panel discussion we're going to have on funding invention and innovation. I'm particularly excited about this topic because it's where I've focused a lot of my work in leading VentureWell for the past 25 years. Our focus is on stimulating and supporting inventors and innovators and creating pathways from academia and research for students, postdocs, and researchers to develop and pursue innovations that emerge from their research and their explorations in science, technology, and engineering. We've had the opportunity to work with thousands of inventors and innovators since our founding, with support from Jerry Lemelson and the Lemelson Foundation. Jerry was a prolific American inventor. His vision was to open up and broaden the pathways leading to invention. And in doing this, to lead to outcomes of personal and professional development and the realization of novel high-impact technologies, products, and solutions that benefit society as a whole. That work has at its core the funding of invention at the idea stage and the willingness to put non-dilutive grant funding in the hands of teams of inventors to validate and move their inventions towards impact. Our work going forward will continue to support these emergent innovators with growing sophistication in mentoring and a focus on building inclusive pathways to becoming an inventor and an entrepreneur, and focusing ever more on supporting solutions to pressing challenges of climate change and sustainability. This morning, we've gathered an outstanding group of experts with deep experience in industry, academic research, and government. Together, we'll explore the important role that funding plays in the process of invention and in the translation and scale-up of novel ideas, new technologies, and harnessing knowledge for the good of society and to address the growing challenges we face. It's not an exaggeration to say that our very fate will rest on our ability to address challenges, including global health crises, climate change and our adaptation to it, and to do so in ways that benefit society while increasing prosperity. Now, this sounds like a very tall order, and it is, but historically, we as a society have succeeded in advancing through invention and innovation and solved massive societal needs based on scientific and technological innovation. And we brought these to previously unimaginable scale and impact. But for that to happen, breakthrough discoveries, creative ideas need to be taken forward, and that requires resources. Our panelists today are themselves innovators, both in the traditional sense, in the work they've done in their research and their entrepreneurial accomplishments, and in the work that they each do to create new and creative approaches to supporting inventorship and in the support that they provide to ensure that innovation flourishes. So I'd like to bring our panel up now, starting with Ella Mirowski, who serves as the SBIR STTR Program Director at the National Science Foundation, where she oversees major portfolios of work in advanced manufacturing, photonics, and energy at SBIR. Ken Blank, who's the President of University Research Strategies, a consultancy that supports institutions and researchers in strategies for the funding of emerging innovations, focusing in on transitioning early-stage innovations into scaled use and adoption. And Ming Hsieh, the founder and CEO of Fulgent Genetics, an accomplished inventor, a serial entrepreneur, and a dedicated philanthropist. So to get things started this morning, I want to just sort of focus in on why this is important. So why is funding particularly important to academic and academic inventing and innovation?
I'll take a stab at that question. From the NSF's perspective, we fund a lot of fundamental science and research, and to be able to translate that, we have the SBIR program and a few other different programs that help with translational efforts, because it's very difficult to find, private equity investing or angel investing to support high-risk projects. And so there's a real gap there. That's where the SBIR program and NSF's SBIR program focuses, is really trying to help get those ideas and projects de-risked to a point that they're ready for commercialization and ready for follow-on funding. And in some rare events, which are always exciting, sometimes people can actually generate revenue. But for high-risk, large projects, really having some initial non-dilutive funding is very important, is what we see. I'll pass the baton over to you.
So in my view, it's part of the basic mission of an institution of higher learning and our great research institutions to be able to carry out research that leads to innovation. The very fabric of our educational system is built around encouraging creativity and new knowledge. That new knowledge, when able to, should be moved into the applied area to benefit society. But the universities are in a unique position to be able to provide the base of innovative ideas and make those ideas real through NIH and NSF funding, and then subsequently carry out that research into an applied application, and thus into commercialization, which benefits society in general.
Yeah, as a member of the National Academy for Inventors, myself went through this process. As an inventor, we know we always have ideas, but how to implement our ideas is we need the funding. So as we become successful, I think now it is important for our the older generation made it through this process to share with our knowledges and also share our resources to fund for the new generation of inventors to make their invention an impact to the world.
So what are some of the unique challenges that academic inventors face in terms of navigating this early funding landscape?
Ming, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, maybe we'll start with you.
Well, it is a good question. Really, for the early stage of the funding is really, depends on the how much you ask for the funding. The issue for the inventors to preserve your ideas, getting across the field validated by you with your colleagues. Okay, figure out what is your end game, and start from the small steps. A lot of early stage inventors, using the family savings, try to get the project started. But as a university, I think definitely we have additional capabilities. You can go for the federal grants, but in my cases, we have a funding for the universities, and currently I'm the benefactor of Ming Hsieh Institute at USC. We provide the annual fundings for the professors, faculties. They have many ideas, but since our funding is kind of in the early stage, we want to encourage people come out very, very exciting ideas. This is a high risk, high reward kind of process, but definitely as we move into the next stage, we want to help our faculties can using this early stage seed funding for them to find the funding from the funding such as NSF, DOD, and the NIH. Okay.
Yeah, it's a great point you make about the importance of validation and the funding both as a validation and as the resource that carries it forward. I'm interested, Ella, the government funding is clearly very critical to the early research phase, and you talked, I think, very, very eloquently and clearly about the many resources that NSF has available. And I'm curious, what impact and what's coming next with this focus on use-inspired research, and how does that really change kind of the landscape for that early stage funding?
So when we think about that use-inspired, say, regional innovation engines, well, I'm going to take it back one step and say we've always had a broader impacts intellectual merit review criteria. So we have intellectual merit, broader impacts, and commercial. And the broader impacts are always about how does this help society as a whole? And one is an economic impact, but then there's many, many other ways that you can, you can do those, reach those customers and provide that impact. And so one is through customer discovery. So tying into that last question too is what some of the resources that NSF has put together has been as a result of seeing thousands of companies come through our programs and saying, what have we seen as a struggle for folks to move from the academic realm, their research from academic realm and into a technology that touches people, and there's I-Core, and so really getting to know the customer and who's going to be using it, what pain point is it solving, and then being able to tailor that technology in a way through the research to meet those needs. And then we have a convergence accelerator again that also helps to see what the translational pathway is. When you think about fundamental research, you have an idea, you're exploring it, and exploring means that you're kind of creating the map as you're going. And so when you start to do translational research, you really want to put that map down and start trying to create the map before you even get there. And so you're trying to envision what it looks like, but you're loosely also trying to be very much willing to listen to input as it's coming all the time, because everything is evolving. The landscape's evolving. Somebody may tell you, oh, now that your company's ready, you may want to consider an IPO. But like, if you look at today's day and age right now, IPO may not be the best thing if the markets are going down. And so what does it look like when you think about, okay, I'm going to need money out there? And so really, like, that's one of the biggest struggles for moving from the university perspective to a translational perspective, is that roadmap, and really solidly creating that roadmap, finding the network and the individuals that are going to help you. And then also really being willing to part that with the fact that you have been the leader for the technology inside the academic realm, and now you may want to have to, pass that baton over to somebody else and trust them and know. And so I always say I-Corps is a great way to meet people and discuss and know how to speak the business language, so that you can also remain on as an advisor or a CTO or something like that, where you feel comfortable that you can communicate. I'll stick down.
So let's stick with the roadmap, and Ken, turn to you to talk a little bit about the roadmap for an institution. So in your work, you work as a consultant to many institutions. And I'm interested to have you share what you've seen as sort of key challenges and ways that the institution can unlock the potential of the researchers.
So the early stage, we're very clear on that. I think that NSF and NIH play that critical role in creating new knowledge, and some may have some application towards it. What I try to do is to work with the institution, with the faculty, to have them understand their capabilities and their research, because the capabilities that they have can be applied to different problems within the problem set that they're working on already. And one of the things we specialize in is working with institutions to be able to get follow-on money to really build an application from the knowledge that's created with NSF and NIH grants within the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense has program managers. Those program managers have problems to solve, and a lot of the money flows through contracts and grants, but the program managers really manage that particular process. And if you can match a capability and a research interest to a problem that the program manager has to solve, they will work with you in a way that doesn't happen with NIH and NSF, in order to be able to build an application that they need to be able to solve their problem. And they can put significant dollars through that. And in the 4 institutions where I was SVP for research, we built large programs that both were funded by NSF and NIH, but also created large revenue streams through working with the Department of Defense as well. And on my team, we have former program managers. We work with both universities and corporations, so we can match up universities who have DoD funding with corporations that are going to commercialize those products or productize those particular products of the applied research that the DoD is funding.
Yeah. So let's talk a little more about industry. Ming, you're a very accomplished serial entrepreneur. You've led multiple invention-based businesses. And I'm interested in your perspective on sort of the key supports that close the gap between the lab and industry.
Well, definitely, it is. I have a lot of scars working on the various different products or working with the industry. I think that the challenges now for the industry working with the university faculties is how much the control from the university researchers or faculties to willing to share their ideas. When you fund from the industry, funding the research at the university level, definitely from the industry is unlike the traditional from the government or the private foundations. The industry is looking for a profit. Is how do you build a sustainable business? So that becomes one issue how do you make it quicker to do the translation from the ideas to products. So in that sense, it really had to be the inventors from the universities has to be tried to be more open and be adapted to the pace from the industry, because the corporations, when they fund the research, the CEO is judged, measured by quarters, not by years of the results. So that's a challenge. When the faculties from universities working with private industry, you had to try to meet the demands because the industry, when they fund research, their CEOs or CFOs also face tremendous pressure. But how to accelerate the product development, make quicker to apply to the field, that's the bottom line.
Yeah. Your point about moving at the speed of business is really a good one. And the I-Corps program is actually a great opportunity for people to learn how to do that and to be able to not only learn the communication skills, but also understand the needs and the pressures of the person for whom they're solving a problem, which I think is sort of I guess one of the cores of the issue. And I'm interested, Elle, if you could maybe talk a little bit more about the development of the value proposition in the context in this kind of bridging process that takes place.
Yeah, I think that's oftentimes a sticky point, because when you're developing, a research plan, design of experiments, you're looking at really tangible milestones with metrics of success that create features, right? And so features are not value propositions. And that's where oftentimes people will stumble a little bit, saying like, well, I got these features. If you buy it, they will come. If you build it, they will come. If you build it, they don't come unless they understand what the value propositions are. So bridging that gap from features to value propositions is through customer discovery. And, again, I said in the talk yesterday, listening is a really large component, and really being able to sort of drop your preconceived notions, put them into a little baggie on the side, and then just absorb and listen. Then you can line and say, well, this feature may end up driving this value proposition for my customer, which is why they would adopt it over, say, my competitor, or say, it is more expensive, but in the end, potentially the savings are larger. And, you kind of have to understand, sometimes companies are like, well, we really need an ROI of a certain time scale, right? And so even if they could save money, if they don't save it in their time scale that they need to, then it's not something that's not a value proposition for them, right? So really honing that value proposition and understanding all the different aspects to it to really be able to target that market. And, also being open to like, oh, I really think it's going to be in this market. I had, we funded a company that said, I think this could be used for, the transportation industry in terms of, large trucks. And then it turns out, no, they pivoted over to aviation because they did customer discovery. And that's where sort of the interest was, and the need was greater. And so customer discovery is continuous. It's every day. It's part of your life. It's part of what you eat, sleep, dream. And so that's something that folks have to get used to. And if you're honest with yourself and you say, look, I really just want to stay in the lab, or I really just want to do that, just finding the right partner whom you can trust, and then sit down and have lunch with, and they can catch you up to speed, and you can at least dabble in that to the extent that you want to,
Yeah. And the partnership and really being willing to get outside of your own little bubble is a key part of this. I think that's come through a number of different ways here, that this is a process of, there's sort of a human side of this, which is about you being empathetic to the need of your potential funder, right? It is a transactional activity, but it's also a human activity. And you're forming trust, you're forming a connection, and you need to do it in their language as well. Ming, I want to come back to you. You've made some very generous philanthropic gifts to higher ed institutions, and they stand out not only for their scale. I mean, a $50 million gift to USC is substantial and impressive, but also for the interdisciplinary approach that's being used in that center that was created. Why an interdisciplinary approach, and how is that working?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that in today's world, interdisciplinary approach, it is getting more and more essential. The reason my interest in the information science, I like the pattern recognition, like the artificial intelligence, and I also interested the computer hardwares. But in the life science, the field, I have very little knowledge. But I do like getting involved in cancer research, early cancer detection, cancer diagnostic, and post-treatment monitoring. So how do you build this cross field? In that sense, I do believe from the information science, artificial intelligence, now can get across the field to the life science. And the reason I started this project is really try to bridge the connections from our engineering schools, science schools, with the pharmacies and the medical enterprise. And that's the experiments I've had at the USC. It seems working well, and very much to expand that idea among our National Academy of Inventors.
Yeah. So we're going to take questions from the audience. So if you have questions, please take a moment to come up. But the last question here for our panelists before we transition to the audience questions, given the number of accomplished inventors that we have here with us today, Ken, what recommendations would you make as to how they could help to create a prosperous invention community?
Sure, I think, if they are willing to do it, they should form groups. I mean, the FNAI chapters is a great way to be able to put together groups that can discuss their experiences, how to listen, pass on those words of advice, and work with new inventors in order to be able to help them make their programs and their inventions successful. I think there are so many lessons to be learned from experienced inventors. Fail quickly is a prominent one. The whole idea of being able to listen to your customer. What does the customer need? How can you best apply your technology? I think the interdisciplinary approach, again, is something that can be passed on. The whole idea of being able to work with people. I've had so many engineers who have come to me with medical devices or medical software, and I say, well, what physician have you worked with? How has this been validated through the medical community? And they look at me and say, well, I didn't talk to anybody. This is going to work, and it's a great idea. And the first thing you have to do is send them back to pair them up with a physician in the field in order to be able to have that validation. If they know to do that in advance by having people who are mentoring them and talking to them, that saves an awful lot of time and energy and money, and makes that money better spent in terms of developing useful, needed, practical devices.
Just to tie it all in, since we're out of time, we're talking a lot about customer discovery here, and that's because subsequent funding after you achieve the non-dilutive, the SBR program and the translational programs aren't meant to keep coming back to it to flow. We want you to be a sustainable revenue generating business, and that requires having that customer. Once you have that customer identified, it's easier to get funding from private sources and institutional investments. So just tying that back together.
Yeah. So I think we'll come back to some of these points as we close, but let's take our first question.
Alex Ignacio, University of Houston. Listening to the panel, I hear a lot of talk about research funding. SBIR, STTRs are great, but they're really research funding. They are not innovation, or they're not innovative funding. For innovation, you've got to go to the next step. You have to have you're not filling the valley of death right now with those kind of monies. You've got to be able to do that. And for that case, although I didn't agree with what Mike Smith talked about yesterday, I think that there's a role here for the FNAI to show that we can essentially work with legislative branches to be able to generate a federal venture fund, something that'll bridge that valley of death for those innovators that have done the research, that have been funded for the research. Yes, they need a community to interact with, but they need the resources there. And the pound of flesh taken by industry is often unpalatable for many folks. So something that really funds innovation and not research is of critical importance. And I don't hear that right now.
Well, I want to come back to Ming, actually, because your perspective on that in terms of the way that industry funds innovation and how it works with academia, I think might address that.
Yeah, I think this is very good comments. Really, a lot of such as the government funding or the private foundation funding, a lot of funding toward high risk, high return reward for the researchers. But once you get the company, a corporation involved, as I mentioned, that becomes more transformational, whether you can build the products, whether you can build the solution to solve the real-time issues. So that's the corporate make the investment of funding becomes more post-stage. Your inventions be validated by the early stage seed fundings and by the government's the early stage fundings. And when you try to become a productization and go to the market, that's normally corporate funding comes from.
And can I just add one thing to that? I think that with our company, we partner with VC firms that are very interested because of our process in terms of developing the applications and especially the validation of working with the DoD. There are VC firms that are out there that are very interested in specific applications, but that validation by the DoD really has attracted a lot of firms to be able to offer the follow-on funding for startup businesses, especially because they see that as a customer that the DoD is a customer that exists, the validation by the DoD, and so they're de-risking their investment by working with us and with the spin-out companies that come out of the universities.
Yeah. So in other words, the funding, the initial funding source, this non-dilutive funding is critical, but you really need to look beyond that and look to other sources of funding and partnership to help develop the idea fully and to take it forward. We're going to switch over to the right side or my right side here.
1 second.
Yeah,
I would
go ahead.
love to chat with you after. So if you
Yeah, and Ella actually is going to have office hours here today. So if you're interested in talking with her or learning more about SBIR opportunities, she's going to have a room and you can sign up for time to talk about that and to get your questions answered.
Good morning. Thanks for the great panel. I'm from the University of Texas at Arlington. I've had some industry background before I moved to academia. And I used to sponsor research as well. Only tell academia on a need-to-know basis. But industry sponsored, given that there's a trend for industry research to be more cost center, places like, Bell Labs, IBM Research, and so on and so forth. Do you see an increased need for a tech center to have a value proposition that includes TRL 2, 3, and so on with patent portfolios? Is there actually a great opportunity now for academia to play a stronger role, with industry actually anxious to relieve themselves of some of the early TRLs? Thank you.
So I think your question is spot on, and I think you had an answer in there as well. So one of my clients, Northeastern University, has a DoD campus where they do DoD work, and on that campus, what they have done is that they incorporate the innovative ideas of the faculty into a research environment, which creates more applications using research scientists and engineers from industry in order to mature the work into a product. And then on the same campus, there are both small startup companies, medium-sized companies, as well as defense integrators. And so that technology can be passed from the faculty to the research scientists and engineers for development, and then into the corporation for manufacturing and commercialization. So I think, that whole context of being able to work with industry is based on these collaborative efforts that can exist with the co-location or cooperation between academia and corporations.
Thank you.
Yeah, adding the Ken's point is really when you do the transition, are you ready to make the next move? Are you able to build the future generation of products, provided it continues the support to extend the product life? So that's also be very critical.
Next question.
So I'm Jim Wynn from IBM Research. What I've become aware after seeing all the names of the new drugs that they end in MAB, and I learned it was monoclonal antibodies. So there seems to be a big source of all sorts of new drugs for treating all sorts of things. But more generally, we've got CRISPR-Cas and the possibility of correcting the bad gene. So do you see a future where we're going to cure all cancer using CRISPR-Cas? Anybody, Ming?
All right, or well, definitely the data will be very, very important. Based on your initial finding, okay, when you knock out some of the certain mutations, make sure you do not get off the target, create side effects. But really the issue is the idea, it is very critical. But how much do you get your research funding really driven by your data? Is that data from the animal, or is that data will be from the human trials? So that's the data. It be the one to provide a lot of information for what you're looking for the next stage.
Well, in the case of sickle cell anemia, there's one patient who was cured of sickle cell anemia by using CRISPR-Cas to modify a very large number of red blood cell stem cells, and then they were reimplanted, and they took over. But this wasn't a simple process. I don't know how it can scale up to treat all people with sickle cell anemia, but the possibility is there. It's just absolutely astonishing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Possibilities are endless. I think
Yeah.
that's a good point. Let's take the next question. We're just a few minutes to go. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Great discussion. Thank you. Adam Vasquez from Made with Merit. I'm on the industry side, actually. And, a couple things to consider. Industry is looking at large market opportunities. So a lot of times inventors will come to industry just saying, look, it's funny that the listening exercise, people said they were ants in the listening exercise yesterday. And a lot of the industry looks as inventors, not down at them that there's some ants, but that ant that you're focused on the innovation and all you're doing is focusing what's the next step in, the queen, the big ant is telling you what to do and everything else. But and the conversation I'm hearing now, even the way we think of going to market is actually a legacy belief system, because if you're going to market, that means you're going to somebody else's market, which you fall into the market followers paradox, which means anything you do is going to promote the leader, and you're just going to become a also ran regardless. So one thing to consider, I think, as inventors, we should be thinking about actually inventing markets with our invention and creating communities around that, not the legacy system of going to somebody else's market in competition. Just something to think about there. But I also think I would love to hear your thoughts on these are very conventional ways of funding, right? And now with such innovations as blockchain, and we're talking about open source, Bitcoin probably is one of the most open sourced, unpatented technologies that's changing how we think of everything. As an example, we are a larger market invention company that invests in a lot of things, but we also do it ourselves all the time. And we established our own Bitcoin mining operation to fund our own innovations where we don't have to get dilution and we can build these own areas in our own view on how we see the world. And I'd love to hear, I think, first, I think it's a matter of time that one university figures this out and says, wow, I can actually build large scale mining operation, use those crypto assets to then leverage our own growth and innovation and change the business model, because student debt it's not sustainable, and the whole business model in universities is broken regardless. So I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on other unconventional funding models, not necessarily creating your own crypto bank that futures you become, a large asset manager, and that's easily doable for everyone in this room more than we realize. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I'd love to have you share a little bit about some of the ways that you're leveraging open source thinking in development of products in your world. Because you, Ming, have created, you've been actually a creator of a market in some of your past exploits.
Right. All right. My comments will be for all of inventors. When we invent some ideas or products, from the investor side, from the other end, this is what kind of barrier of entry you create. What's the differentiator for your invention with the product existing in the world? So that one's give you a lot of confidence, or for the investor to look into is the barrier of entry. What is the differentiation you have? What kind of IP protection do you have? And of course, what is advantage for your current solution versus existing products or the issues?
Well, can I just ask the question?
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, so we're going to have to actually close.
I'm sorry, can I just rephrase that about the barrier of entry? In market followers paradox, other people pile in. If you're the leader and the first mover and all of that good stuff, and you've created enough conversation out there that recognizes you as a leader, competition is collaboration, and it actually helps you become number one and everybody bigger with the market. So anybody that's successfully built a market understands the barrier of entry is only that initial, so I get to a level of everybody recognizes us. And then you want everybody to come in. So that's when the patents don't matter anymore. The IP doesn't matter anymore. And certainly the barrier to entry, anybody thinking like that is thinking legacy shareholder capitalism, not conscious capitalism. So that's where we're all moving. So just something to consider on that topic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well,
yeah.
So we're unfortunately out of time. We're going to be around. So if you want to try and catch us after, happy to continue the conversations. Apologies we didn't get to your questions. For everybody who had them, and do take the opportunity to follow up with Ella later today. Please join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you.